So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for attending this annual event. My name is Larry. Please rise and the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Franklin Delano Roosevelt once said, "A conservative is a man with two perfectly good legs, however, has never learned how to walk forward." Fortunately, we as Democrats know how to walk forward. We believe in helping people lift themselves up, supporting them through difficulties and misfortune. As Democrats, we assist those in need when they are down, and asking those who are able to contribute a little more for the general good. We Democrats understand and work towards a simple notion that people working together can make a positive impact in a community. Someone who has demonstrated a positive impact in our community is our scholarship recipient, Shelby Miller. She exemplified the democratic values we hold dear by volunteering for numerous organizations and committees. One of these organizations is the American Legion Ladies Auxiliary, where she volunteered her time for her 4 high school years. She's also demonstrated dedication to dance and other cultural activities. We welcome her and are pleased to present her with this scholarship award.
I'd just like to quickly thank the committee for giving me this award. It will really help me in my endeavors in college. It will really help me with a little bit of my debt and paying for my books. And I really would like to thank my family for helping me.
Congratulations, Shelby. Good luck next year. In this year of crazy politics, we have before us 2 candidates who bring some class to the process, Mr. Doug Belanger and Mr. Moses Dixon. Whoever ends up winning the primary in September will be the candidate charged with unseating a current and Republican state representative. I'd like to welcome Candy Earl Carlson. She is a Worcester City Councilor as well as the chair of the Worcester Democratic Committee. Today she has graciously offered her services as a moderator to this debate. Please welcome Candy.
Thank you, everyone, and it's great to be back in the lovely town of Leicester on this beautiful day. So this morning, it's my honor to be the moderator for 2 great candidates that we have here running for the Democratic State Rep seat here. So this morning, what we're going to do is Doug will start off with his opening remarks. And then we have several questions that were put together on behalf of the people. So what we'll do is we'll go back and forth. So the first question will go to Doug and then Moses, and back and forth, back and forth. And then the closing will be Moses and then followed by Doug. And the only thing, obviously, that we ask people is to be respectful. And I don't think I, need to say that to this group. So I'm not sure if anybody has any questions in terms of how this will go. If you do, I'm happy to entertain them. Otherwise, we will begin with Mr. Doug Belanger.
Thank you, Candy. And thank you. Are we on yet?
Yes.
Bill? Oh, good.
It doesn't seem
It doesn't seem it, but you're right. Anyway, I don't usually need one, so we're good with that too. First of all, thank you, Candy, for coming out and helping us out, and for all the work you do as the longtime chair of the city committee. You've just done so much for all the causes that most of us truly believe in and work for. And Adam in the town committee for putting this on once again. Certainly want to recognize Senator Moore is here, and he's been doing some great work for us, not only in this community, but throughout the district. And finally, congratulations. I'm prejudiced, my niece, but Shelby, we're very proud of you. Most of these things, people start off with a long hit list of accomplishments or their long resume, and both are usually exaggerated. So I'll spare you all of that. You know me as a lifelong resident of the district. You know me as a 20-plus year selectman in town, and really my activism throughout the district, from the Worcester Regional Transit Authority to the Worcester Airport and all of our things in Leicester. So again, I'll skip the resume part and really get to why it is that I'm running and why do I do some of the things I do. After the last race, we ended up losing by a total of 43 votes in the final general election after winning the primary by a 2-to-1 margin. And the difficulty, really, and the angst and the frustration of that was felt throughout the family and the community of kind of how that race ended, and it got pretty nasty in the last 72 hours from our Republican, now incumbent representative. So why would you bother doing this again is a fair question. And it really comes down to the history, what makes me tick in particular. This will be the first time I've run for office where neither my mother nor my father are alive to be part of it, to mentor me, to support me, and quite frankly, critique me. And that's difficult. I miss them both immensely. They had the structure and the foundation that taught every one of my 6 brothers and sisters community service. That's what makes us go. My dad died a few years ago, and my mother just this past year. And with Dad, I got to spend, as I did later with my mother, the last month of her life, some real quality time. And for the first time of his entire life, he finally spoke about his service in the war. And he kidded, and it's probably where I get a little bit of my bad sense of humor, but he kidded that he spent his 19th birthday at the beach. It was Normandy Beach, in the largest and most deadly invasion in the history of warfare. And he talked about people coming down, being shot, parachuting, and just dropping in. And here's 2 weeks before his 19th birthday. Can you fathom that? Can you imagine being... Nick, how old are you?
19.
All right. Can you imagine being Nick's age? I should know this, he's my nephew, but Nick's age, but going through that? But that's what the greatest generation did. And then they came back and they didn't talk about it. And again, until his deathbed, I didn't know he was part of that. So then finally what happens? He talks about that, comes back, and wants to live the American dream that they all fought and sacrificed so much for. Raised a family, did community service, but Boy Scouts, a lot of things like that. But then the second pivotal event happened that my dad talked about. And I remember, I was 13, I remember it well. On November 22nd, 1963, when John Kennedy was assassinated. It's the first time I ever saw my father cry, and it's the first time that he really took me and my 2 older brothers aside and said, this is why it matters. This man is talking about community service, building community, building democracy, so that we don't have to go to war to spread democracy, because it's the community and starting with the foundation and working out. Later, my mother, she came from a much more heart-based, caring-based, motherly way. And in her last days, what she talked about was, one, our concern or disappointment with what had happened with the election, but so proud that after that election, after taking that kind of abuse, to come back and win the seat again to be the longest-serving selectman in the town of Leicester. And she said, Dad, to be proud, because he doesn't like quitters. So for all those reasons, that's what motivates me. And then finally, there was that yellow kind of scrolled up thing that was on our den in the little house in Cherry Valley that we grew up in. And it's a quote that I don't want to get wrong from President Kennedy. So this hung for as long as I can remember in that little den. President Kennedy said, history will not judge our endeavors, and a government cannot be selected merely on the basis of gender, color, creed, or religion. For of those to whom much is given, much is required. Ladies and gentlemen, I do this because I have been given so much. I love doing what I do, not for the money, not for the pay, not for the notoriety or prestige when there is some, but the reality is, it's what makes me tick, it drives me, and it's that foundation I got from my family. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug.
Well, good morning, everyone. I know some of you know me, and I look forward to getting to know those of you who don't know me. My name is Moses Dixon. I'm running for state rep here for the 17th Worcester District. I'm the son of a pastor and a janitor and a housekeeper. Although I don't have any 10 commandments, I do have a few suggestions about how we can move the district forward. And I want to thank Candy for moderating today's this conversation. I want to congratulate the scholarship award recipient. Your parents must be very proud of you, and it's very good to see that the community comes together to make sure that young folks have an opportunity just as I have, because it really takes a village to raise a child, and so you should be very proud of your accomplishment. So I look forward to today's conversation. I hope to talk about the issues that are facing the district and the ways that we as Democrats, because I want you all to remember that we're Democrats. And we may disagree on some things, but at its core, we are Democrats, and we want to make sure that we have substantive issues that we can take the fight to the other side in November. And so I look forward to having a great conversation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Moses. Now, I think what we can do is give this mic to these two gentlemen so they don't have to get up and down. So bear with me for 1 second. I know, upside down, right? Sorry, Doug. So there's a list of questions here, and we have 11 questions that we will be asking the candidates. So what we're going to do, like I said, is we will start with Doug. So Doug will answer the first question, followed by Moses to answer the question as well. Nobody told me about any rules, so I guess I'm going to make them as we go. So I would say that if folks, either Moses or Doug, has a rebuttal on a question, we could ask them to do that within a minute's time. And I would ask us to kindly keep this in a timely order, because quite honestly, we could be here all day if we don't say that. So as much as I love you guys, we do have some rules, okay? So the first question goes to Doug Belanger, and it reads, how will you encourage new businesses to come to Leicester as well as Worcester?
Very good, thank you. It's something I've been doing, and I'm happy to say we've made some progress, never enough. Both Worcester and Leicester have some infrastructure problems that need to be reinvested. That's what draws more business than not. There are zoning issues, in particular in the town of Leicester, that the town, usually against my urging in this case, has a slight majority that continues to try to limit some of the businesses that I, as chairman of the Economic Development Committee, tried to bring in, including a CVS at the center of town and some other businesses, spin-offs. So the encouragement, the answer is to continue to expand our infrastructure, to publicly reach out, and we've been doing this. We've got some great information in modern technology and social media saying that overall Leicester wants business, is looking for business. We have certain areas we've rezoned to make it more entertaining and more likely the businesses would come in particular Route 9 West and Route 56. So, and in Worcester it is about infrastructure and, again, some zoning issues. And here and there some tips, but that's a whole nother question. Thanks.
So one of my core issues for this campaign, and quite frankly for some time now, is talking about universal accessible broadband. We live in a technology advanced society, and one of the ways to attract new businesses and bring them into new communities, businesses look where they can have technology that will do the high-speed internet, the producing of some of the machines that they use in their businesses. So one of the ways that I think in particular, not only here in the town, but also in the city, and as a district as a whole, is to really tap into the universal accessible broadband. The federal government has laid out ways that localities can access funding to be able to build the fiber for cities and towns so that they could have broadband that will attract new businesses to communities. And so I think that is a way that we can do it. There's ways that we can talk about how do we expand the existing businesses, both here in the town and in the city. But it's also important to make sure that, if we're going to talk about tax increment finance, is that it's going to be fair for the community that is going to be asked to provide a TIFs. But in short, the question and the answer to this is using technology as a way to attract new businesses without changing the fabric or the way of life in terms of, Leicester's a mom and pop kind of town, and it's really one where people take a lot of pride in the businesses and they really care about what's going on. And so I think if we look at the technology, that is a way that we can begin to address the issue of bringing new businesses or expanding existing businesses.
Thank you. So now the second question, we'll start with Moses. The question reads, there is currently a case, before we do that, Frank Ruggiero is going to be our timekeeper. So folks will have 2 minutes. So when you get that there's 15 seconds left, Frank will let you know that there's 15 seconds left. Okay, question 2. There is currently a case in the Mass SJC regarding the La Salette Shrine. According to court filing by La Salette, city officials determined in 2013 that a large portion of the shrine was taxable. The shrine was established in 1953 to promote prayer and devotion to the Virgin Mary. At the shrine's expansive campus in Attleboro, the document said in 2013, city assessors valued the shrine at $12.8 million and determined that a portion of that amount was not tax exempt, resulting in a tax levy of $92,292.98. Do you think that religious institutions should pay taxes on property where non-religious activity takes place?
Look,
If you need me to repeat it, I'm happy to.
Well, look, first off, I want to say that I don't know this issue wholeheartedly, and it's certainly one that I will look into. But in terms of the nuances of this, look, this is people have the right to practice whatever religion they choose, but I cannot speak to that because I don't know the details of that. And so that is my answer. My answer to you is that I will look into it and I'll get back to you on it, but I don't know the details of that, so I would have to study the issue a little more to give an opinion on it.
Thank you, Moses. Doug.
Thank you. I was kiddingly going to say, could you repeat that, just because the question was longer than we're allowed answers, but but aside from that. No, I've been reading and following this. There's been quite a lot of chatter both online and the Boston Globe in particular, just in the issue. And it's a tough one. First and foremost, it's a local issue, and I always respect being a longtime 30-year plus member of the local government. I would hope that they deserve locally to make a decision. But in principle, since the question asks something that is not necessarily specific to this La Salette case, but to the principle of where do you draw the line, in essence, between church and state when it comes to taxing property. And my principle is very basic, and that is that I do believe that when something is used for the specific religious purpose, then that geographic, that piece is tax exempt. And I believe that would hold up in most Supreme Courts. I do think, though, that once it goes from that to a profitable endeavor, let's say, so the Holy Cross, any church, anybody takes something and then turns it into a retail or profitable establishment, then you're competing with some of our businesses and you're competing with an advantage of not paying taxes. So there's a line. When it is directly related to your religious practice, then I do believe it deserves and should have and is protected under the Constitution as tax exempt. When it gets into more commercial, that's where I would draw the line and say, commercial's commercial, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. So Doug, this question is for you. There are large areas in Leicester which is zoned for business but has not been developed. How will you bring in the businesses Leicester desperately needs to support its services? And what type of industry would you actively encourage moving to Leicester, moving to Worcester?
Yeah, I've been part of a lot of, in fact, at a recent town meeting, we just voted to do a complete review of all zoning. But we've been, over the last 20 years, expanding our zoning base. Myself and Selectman Tom Brennan, some 20 years ago, looked at the Route 9 corridor in particular, and there was a 200-foot setback. That means that a business could only go 200 feet from Route 9. Well, that was just crazy. What would you open there? A postage stamp? So we brought it to town meeting, passed legislation that said it would be 2,000 foot. Personally, and unfortunately for me, the biggest responder was Walmart. I'm not a big fan, but that is the beginning of business expansion. So what happens is now that the economy is coming back, we have quite a few retail-oriented businesses looking to tag into the Route 9 West corridor where Walmart is. We've got a couple of smaller strip malls that are already on the map. And when you get to Route 56, what we call Highway 56, then that's where light industrial types businesses are zoned, properly zoned, and we're anxious to welcome them here.
So, I'm going to go back to talking about technology. We have both here in the town and in the city of Worcester, we have two great colleges and universities. We have Becker College, where I'm a professor. I teach state and local government at Becker College. And we have Clark University. And I think in particular for the town here, tapping into some of those resources that Becker College have, the Mass Digi gaming system, which is an extraordinary program that is bringing not only young minds from all over the country to develop technology and to use it in a way that will be profitable to generate revenue for both, I think in my view, the town and the city. So I would like to see or imagine using the town here as the hub for high-speed, broad internet access. I think that's a way that will certainly attract businesses. I think that's a way that will keep the fabric of the town, but at the same time generating some revenue that will create what I call a creative economy. So that's one of the ways that I think that we could bring new businesses in the town.
Just a brief rebuttal, and that is just factually working both with Becker and Clark in particular, that the students there have completed a projection, a study, which ties in not only the whole upgrade in electronics and social media and the high fiber network, but it does that through also the old-fashioned infrastructure of water, wind, and things that we need to do to be able to power and generate. The one thing with a community like Leicester is you have a limited resource in water in particular, and there has to be a balance between the two in order to provide that service, including the necessary fire prevention. So the process has begun. I'm excited about the future because those students put together for us at no charge a study that rolled that out pretty well.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, so look, this is something that is certainly creative, and I think it could work. So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share the study with us in terms of where did you find the study. I'm certainly happy to look over it because I know of such study. But I know in the Worcester Business Journal about 2 months ago, there was an extensive article about how the city and the region is really taking an advantage of really building the fiber for high-speed broadband internet access. And so I think it will work, but obviously there's some work that we've got to do. And one of the ways that we can make it work is to pull together an advisory committee of folks from both the town and the city to talk about how this will work. So if Mr. Belanger doesn't mind, at some point to provide the the study to us so I can get a better sense of your counter argument.
Thank you, Moses. So question 5 goes to Moses. Do you support the act to establish equal pay for positions of comparable skill, effort, and responsibility, notwithstanding gender? Would you like me to read the House bill number, or?
So are you talking about equal pay for equal work for women, for people of color? So what are the details of that?
So I do not have the details of this, so I will, pardon me?
Alan and Helen.
Okay, well, it's equal pay for equal work.
Oh, yeah.
Regardless of sex and gender.
So this is an issue that I have been, passionate about for a long time. When I worked at the State House for Representative Mary Keefe, one of the very first bills that she got signed into law by the governor, working along with Senator Chandler and some of the other folks from the delegation, and I actually helped write this bill on Rep. Keefe's behalf, is establishing the Worcester County Commission on the Status of Women, where we put a focus on making sure that women get equal pay for equal work, making sure that people from all backgrounds are treated fairly. So, there's no question about whether I support that or not. And I think we need to take it a step further. I think the treasurer rolled out some efforts a month ago on this issue. And so, in short, I support it. I think we need to do more to continue to make sure that we don't have a regressive position on this. And I support it wholeheartedly.
I'll assume we just go. I don't want to stop. Listen, it's not only something that I'm passionate about, it's something that I've been doing for a long time. In the last 30 years as a business agent for one of the largest unions in the country, I have delivered on and brought to, and especially to the 40,000 members we represent in New England, equal pay now. In every one of our contracts, we have been able to say, here is the job description, that's what it pays. It does not look to race, gender, or any other hurdle. It actually just establishes the job criteria, and the pay. The reason that I am best to be able to take this from the 20-year discussion at the State House, much too long, gets a lot of studies, it gets put in a lot of drawers. The reality is I can make the argument to those that are hesitant about this, that it can be done. Stop and Shop, UMass Memorial, St. Vincent's Hospital, Weetabix Corporation have not lost any money or had any problems paying their gender, their help, the same rate of pay for doing the same work. We can make the example, I can make the argument, and it can come out of the drawer and out of the study and into reality, because that's where it belongs.
Thanks, Doug. So the next question is for Doug. Doug, do you support the act providing for equitable coverage and disability policies, which is House Bill H 784? Women pay upwards of 75% more than their male workers do for the same insurance.
Yes. And again, it really comes down to much like the previous question. And the legislation, which again is public, as is the other studies mentioned earlier, is public documents. They're out there, and my interest is well beyond what I do for a living and what I believe in. It is the fact that we can take that same issue, whether it's equality for benefits, early on. I think I was the first negotiator for a union to bring up in the early days of the marriage equality question. And we put it into our contracts before the state legislature passed the law. That's the kind of leadership I'm talking about. You've got to lead by example, because those that are tentative need almost the excuse and the nudge to get them where we need them to be. Otherwise, it's too easy to be pushed one side or another and study it some more. I'm done with studying certain things. They've been being studied for a long time. It is time. I have led that fight, and I'll continue to do so. Thanks.
Moses?
So in short, I agree with Mr. Belanger on this issue. But I want to touch on another point within that question about those with disability. I have spent the last 2 years on the task force for the universal accessible park and playground that is going to go off of Mill Street. And it's really a very exciting opportunity where we can bring folks from all different backgrounds with disability, those who are elderly, those who are young, those from different backgrounds. So in short, making sure that we are, as a Commonwealth, making sure that we're taking care of those with disabilities and to make sure that they have the services that they need.
Thank you, Moses. So the next question goes to you, Moses. Rep. Lyons recently introduced a budget amendment to restrict funding of Planned Parenthood. Rep. Campanelli voted for this amendment. What is your position on funding for women's health?
Look, I have a total of 13 sisters, and I have, a whole host of nieces. And, women have the right to choose, that period. And I don't think, we should be in a position where we tell folks who might have a health issue or just a personal issue. So in short, I disagree with that amendment, and I am a strong supporter of women's right to choose.
Thank you, Moses. Doug?
Makes me crazy. First of all, it's established law. Second of all, Planned Parenthood was the victim of a complete false attack that, although was straightened out, people still seem to keep repeating. And the reality is 90% of what Planned Parenthood does is provide services to those that can't afford it otherwise, related to women's health in particular. But when it comes down to it, it's the hypocrisy of Kate Campanelli in particular that needs to be pointed out on a regular basis. She talks about too much government overreach, talks about too much government interference, except, by the way, when it comes to a woman's body. It's hypocritical, it's wrong, and government has a role, and certainly we could have a discussion about where costs are, where money goes, and so on. That's a fair discussion. But when it comes down to that right, both the right to choose and the right to have those services done, it is that, a right. And it's been established, certain people are going to keep coming after things in a somewhat hypocritical way, and I'll be one that's going to point it out.
Thanks, Doug. Question number 8 goes to Doug. There's a push to expand the number of charter schools. Do you support this initiative?
Candy's heard me on this one. No. In fact, I really have a problem with charter schools in general. I've been doing budgets in this town between 10 years as the finance chairman in this community and 20 years as a selectman. And every year we get that line that says, here's how much more money you're going to get, and then it deducts the various costs from voc schools to charter schools. In the first year they say you're going to get 100% reimbursement. That's great. The second year it's 75%, third year 50%, and so on. So ultimately, it is taking money away, charter schools take money away from the public schools who don't have the ability to say, we have a problem, as we recently had in Leicester. We have some problem children, some children that need some extra attention, and God bless them. But we have less and less resources to deal with that because we have more and more resources going to someone that if they're a problem in the charter school, they just go, you're out of here, gone, just like a private school. They don't have the same standards, they don't have the same certifications, they don't have the same rules, yet they are taking valuable dollars and resources from the very public schools that must and should deal with the issue. Thanks.
Thanks, Doug. Moses?
So I actually agree with Mr. Belanger on this issue. I don't think we should be taking our public dollars that are meant to educate our young folks in our public school systems for charter schools. We've got issues with kids going to school hungry. We've got issues with, kids sitting in classrooms that don't have heat. And we're talking about taking money away from our public schools to give to, in my view, for-profit entities. And I don't think that's what we need here. What we need to do is make sure that we're funding our schools at the highest level on a local level to ensure that we're educating our young folks for this century and beyond. And so, I am totally against the funding for charter schools, and so that's where I stand on that issue.
Thanks, Moses. Question number 9 goes to Moses. The Foundation Budget Review Commission has recommended increased funding to school districts under Chapter 70. What is your position on this issue?
So I think we should be funding our schools at the highest level. And when it comes to education, look, I'm the first in my family to graduate from high school and to go to college. And I went to public schools, and my mom busted her hump working at a local community college cleaning toilets so that one day her sons and her daughters could go to school. And so in terms of the funding, I think it's extraordinarily important. We cannot put a cap on how much it costs to educate our young folks, because in my view, there's no limit. We've got to do it. And so I think, going forward, we need to look at new ways on how we can improve the budget for our young folks.
Thanks, Moses. Doug?
Could you repeat that?
Huh?
Would you give me the question?
So the Foundation Budget Review Commission has recommended increased funding to school districts under Chapter 70. What is your position on this?
No, I support the increased funding, and the difficulty I have with this and so many other things is with one hand they give and one hand they take away. The balance of what comes from the State House has to be a total. It's not in a vacuum. We got the great notice from our wonderful state representative already announcing that, oh, good news, we have increased funding for schools and for general government. And the first line, that's true. The problem is the rest of the lines on the cherry sheet, that is the sheet we get from state government on how much you get in total local aid, had higher deductions than we've ever had. Therefore, the net, the bottom line, the money that we actually get is less. Today's Telegram and Gazette, 13 less positions they're going to be able to fund in city schools. Lester's still looking at how we're going to balance, all because the bottom line is less. So never mind the smoke and mirrors and the idea that we're going to increase this. I want to know what you're taking away, because the bottom line is what matters.
Moses?
You're right, it is about what matters. And what matters is to make sure that you have a state rep, someone who has worked in state government, just as I have, to be able to get in those meeting rooms with the committee to make sure that the schools in both Leicester and the city are adequately funding. We can talk about knowing the budgets and all of that, but at the end of the day, it's knowing the process and how you get it done. And so I'm going to be an advocate if I'm given an opportunity to serve.
Thank you. Doug?
Just a rebuttal. First of all, I have lobbied, petitioned, and sat in both in the committee meetings throughout the Senate and the House. When it's budget time, I've gone with the Mass Teachers, I've gone with the Education Association of Worcester, and I've taken our own school committees and fought for real funding for real numbers. You have to know where the numbers are. I don't think Kate Campanelli was intending to mislead anybody when she said, oh boy, we got more money. I don't think she understood the total budget process. Working 9 months as an aide to a state rep doesn't make you understand the entire process. You have to go and understand the budget in order to argue for it. I've done that. We've been successful, but not successful enough. And I think by building coalitions as I have over many years to be able to deliver the full funding, that's what will make the difference, and will bring other colleagues around to understand they have to have the courage of their convictions. When they say I'm for schools, somebody's got to be able to call them for that difference of where it starts and where it ends. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Question number 10 goes to Doug. Doug, do you support the Fair Share Plan to place an additional tax on incomes over $1 million?
Absolutely. The so-called millionaire tax is 4% above net income of $1 million. So first of all, it will raise $2 billion, mainly dedicated to what we just talked about, education. $2 billion more in the system certainly will make a difference. But 4% tax, additional surcharge on net $1 million income won't change their way of life. Somehow or another, the caviar still flows, the houses around the country still work, and they'll survive just fine. God bless them, it's the American way, they made the money, but that 4% is not going to change their quality of life, but the $2 billion will change how we fund our educational system.
Moses.
Yeah, so I agree with Mr. Belanger on this issue. You know, Representative John Bonenda, God bless his soul, you know, in 2014, when I was thinking about running, and I went to meet with him, and he said something to me that really stuck with me. He says, if you get a chance and you're elected, he says, never forget the little guy, because the rich will always take care of themselves. And that is where I stand on this issue. They will be fine, but we need to make sure that we're fine as well, and making sure that folks are paying their fair share in taxes. And so that's where I stand on this issue.
Thank you. Question 11 goes to Moses. Moses, do you support a move to a $15 minimum wage?
Absolutely. I absolutely support this. I support it for a number of reasons. I support it because it's the right thing to do. There's a lot of people out there struggling that are living on paycheck to paycheck. They can't save enough to provide for their families. They're just really having a hard time. And so I support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. You know, on a personal note, you know, my father passed away about a month ago in the state of South Carolina, and my dad worked for 31 years in a factory in South Carolina, retiring in 2006. And when I was home, my siblings and I were going through some of his things, and we came across one of his old pay stubs where he was making $5.20-something an hour. Now that's there. And so, you know, it's very hard to imagine those that don't want to raise the minimum wage an hour, but it's something that we must do. It's something that we have to do, and we got to make sure that folks like McDonald's and these other big chain companies are paying people a fair wage. So I support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour.
Thank you, Moses. Doug?
Absolutely. I've marched, I've petitioned, we've collected signatures. I'm proud to say my son and my extended family have been behind this since it became a movement, and we're in the early stages of it. And so it is something well beyond just saying yes. My passion comes down to Massachusetts should lead the way. We've had states pass it already, but it's usually in incremental stages, and they do that to say, well, it'll ease in the burden for some of the businesses. But the reality is we're paying for it now. Other people pay for it now. When you apply to a job at Walmart and they hand you a form so you'll qualify for Medicare or Medicaid, and so you can apply for food stamps or the SNAP program, because they're not going to pay you enough, and so the government picks up the difference. So it's a hidden cost now. It's the wrong people paying the burden. So absolutely, Massachusetts should lead the way. We should do it instantaneously. It's an argument I would make, and I wouldn't wait for 2 years to make my maiden speech as Kate Campanelli did. I would do it as part of the maiden speech the first day after I get sworn in that there's a session, because that's how important it is, and it is a hidden cost. Separately, Kate has voted against any kind of minimum tax paid for corporations, against that minimum tax, but is against minimum wage increases for working people. It's a sin.
Thank you, Doug. So the next question goes to Moses. Could you tell us your position on the marijuana legalization?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I have really looked into this issue, and in short, I don't agree with it. And I don't agree with it because I think it will lead it sets a bad precedent leading to other drugs. But I think those, for medical purposes, I support. But I don't support the legalization of marijuana because I think it will lead to the using of other drugs. But I do support the use of medical marijuana.
Thank you, Moses. Doug?
Thank you. Well, the medical marijuana is already legal in the state of Massachusetts. One of the new expanding businesses in Leicester is a medical marijuana dispensary. The Board of Selectmen have licensed them. They are in the process of renovating their building. That's already a reality. But as far as the ballot question regarding complete legalization of marijuana, I have difficulty, but in principle, I do not want to see anybody going to jail or being charged, and the decriminalization was the first step in protecting that. There is some concern, I have some concern, I think the legislature justly has some concern. I know Senator Moore went on a fact-finding trip in Colorado, and the concern is if it's just blatantly legal, some of the pathways, some of the problems. So it's an issue where I am not morally opposed to people that smoke marijuana, but I will say that it should be legislated at this point, not a ballot question, because the ballot question is very vague and it leaves a lot of concerns for how it's enforced, a lot of problems for our police departments that they don't need the added burden. But I think it's something that should continue to be talked about in the legislature in a way that will keep it from becoming used, abused, and if we're ever going to legalize it in any casual way, it would have to be with an awful lot of control. So at this point, I don't intend to vote on the actual ballot question in support of the ballot question, but I would always want to have that discussion in the legislature.
Thank you. So the next question goes to you, Doug. Do you support paid family leave?
These are the easy ones. I again, in the contracts I've negotiated, in the contracts I have been doing and enforcing for almost 30 years now, I not only believe in it, but if you see the new film Michael Moore, not our senator, but the producer Michael Moore put out, it is about how so many countries across the world provide paid family medical leave, and this country somehow can't figure out a way to do that. I've had a lot of cases under the protection of the Family Medical Leave Act that at least gives the time off, and because the people I represent have union contracts, they usually have some bank time to be able to use that. Again, those industries, large industries we represent, have not gone out of business, have not filed for bankruptcy, have not had any problems, and they are paying that. Much like an earned sick time, an earned leave time. For the amount of hours you work, you get an hour or two in the bank, and that's how you end up funding that without hurting the business. Everybody wins. It is a part of our society that we're missing that opportunity for quality of life.
Moses?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Belanger on this issue again. You know, we've got to make sure that if we want a healthy and productive workforce, that we've got to give people the services and the opportunities and what they have actually worked for to work for them. And so I strongly support this. You know, you won't find me disagreeing on this, so I support it wholeheartedly.
Okay, Doug, could you give us your position on Common Core and where you stand?
As in the testing?
Yes.
Is that what the question's related to? Yeah. Listen, first of all, I believe...
Hold up.
Back up.
Back up.
There's a ballot question this fall to remove Common Core from Massachusetts.
To make Common Core the rule of...
No, to abolish it.
To abolish it. Yeah, I really... it's too bad, again, that it's a ballot question. There are, as much as I love the democracy and our right to petition, it's historic, it comes with the Founding Fathers. There's oftentimes, I think, the need to debate these things and come up with all the unintended consequences, which is what our legislative body should be doing. But as a ballot question, although I have not, I thought I've read them all, I did not see that one, and I will tell you that I have a problem in general with Common Core being a law of the land. I do think that regions or districts can determine how they are going to test and what they're going to do. But Common Core becomes much bigger or broader of a top-down type of way of running our system, and I have a problem with that. I would localize and regionalize much more often. So in principle, I would not want to, and I do not like the idea of Common Core as a across the board, but each region, each district. So for the ballot question, I would again rather have it back to regions and districts and not a top-down.
Moses?
Yeah, look, I have some of the same sentiments as Mr. Belanger on this. Look, we have got to make sure whatever works for each community and region work for them. And so in terms of the ballot question, obviously I would wish it was something that was debated in the legislature rather on the ballot. We'll see how it will go in the elections, but I think regions should have the say in what they would like to see in their communities.
Thank you. So that's it for our questions. So now we will ask Moses to do his closing statement, and we will give you 2 minutes to do a closing, and we'll start with Moses Dixon.
Well, first off, I want to thank Candy Carlson again for moderating this conversation. And thank you all again for inviting me here to talk about the issues that are important. As we've discussed in this conversation, although that Worcester and Leicester are on the rebound, we have work to do. By providing the core functions of government, by providing the services we expect and we need from local government, we pave the way for our regional future. A focus on infrastructure from maintaining and upgrading our schools and our roads to developing broadband for underserved communities, that's the kind of focus that we need to ensure our future vitality. By growing the local economy, cultivating opportunities across the board, we give graduating students a reason to stay here and to build their own futures just as I have. Because if you're a young person with a brand new degree and you're looking for a great place to settle down and to plant roots, we want Worcester and Leicester to be on your short list. And to be on that short list, to keep graduating students from leaving with valuable skills that they've gained here, we've got work to do. To attract new people to the region from elsewhere, drawn here by opportunity and the quality of life, we have work to do. Though Worcester and Leicester are on the rebound, we have work to get done to where we should be. It won't be easy work, but it's work that must be done. And it can't be done, that's because there are real workers in the rooms, there's students, there's union members, and there's business people and nonprofit leaders, all of us working on behalf to create a better future for us all. We all come from somewhere else. What matters is not where we come from, but where we can go, and what we can realistically do for our community and for the future. We are here now. We do not live in yesterday or today, but or the day before. We have an opportunity now to cut a new path, a path planted in the future in the hope and the idea that we all can work together. We all cut our own paths in life as we can, as opportunity allows. The 17th Worcester District is my home, the place I chose to plant roots and to build a good life. And that's a good thing. Worcester and Leicester welcomed me as this great region has welcomed many others before, and they will still continue to do so. I'm giving back to the community that welcomed me. And if I do cross the finish line in first place, I'll work every day on behalf of the people of the 17th Worcester District. And that is why the mayor of the city of Worcester endorsed me a few days ago, because he knows that I'm going to be a strong partner, not just for the city, but for the district as well. And so I thank you all for the conversation here today. I look forward to many more substantive conversations about the issues, because at its core, we're Democrats. And at the end of the day, that is what binds us together. And so over the next few months, I hope to meet as many more people as I can to talk to them about why I am the best person to serve the people of the 17th Worcester District, because we have some real opportunity here. This is a great place, and I'm just thrilled that you invited me here to come and speak and talk about what I believe can move us forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Moses. Doug?
Thank you. Well, we don't all come from somewhere else. I come from here. I was born in Worcester and raised here. My family moved here when we were young in first grade. And my heart and soul is the district. The important part of this campaign to me, and the important difference really comes down to who can best beat Kate Campanelli, because we've lost our voice. John Benenda was our voice for 30 years. He was not shy about fighting for this district, and like me, he had a foot in each part of it. He was born in Worcester and taught in Leicester. I was born in Worcester and live in Leicester. It really comes down to the heart and the soul of knowing the intricacies of our neighbors, of our friends, of having invested in that, of having fought the good fight, and in the last election coming up 43 votes short, but giving the people the opportunity to correct that mistake. I would not sit there as Kate Campanelli has done and waited 2 years before ever speaking. When we lost millions of dollars in potential aid in the city of Worcester and the town of Leicester, not an objection, not a word. When Senator Moore was just here and we talked about $1 million bridge, $1.2 million was allocated to the town of Leicester for a bridge that has had a temporary bridge for 20 years. And only two things changed. We got a new governor and a new state representative, and the administration took that $1.2 million, bonded and given to the town of Leicester for that bridge, 20 years, a temporary bridge, not one objection. Well, I objected, and Senator Moore objected, and we went to the Department of Transportation and we got that money back. That's what it takes. It takes knowing the neighborhoods, it takes knowing the streets. I was a paper boy throughout Worcester and Leicester. I really know the streets. And since then, knowing the people and the causes and what matters, and making that argument to your fellow brothers and sisters in the state legislature to be able to say, this is what we need. With knowledge, with passion, with experience, to be able to say, you've got to help me on this bill, certainly I can help you on that bill. I've done that before. I built those coalitions representing the people I represent, and I would do that for this district. We need it. We must take it back. We've had our voice lost for 2 years. There's one thing, anybody knows me, critical or not, you'll know it won't take me 2 years to speak up on the State House floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Adam Minot.
Thank you, Candy, for moderating. Thank you to both candidates, Moses and Doug. Thank you for coming and voicing your views. Thank you to Helen Bauer from LCAC for filming. Look forward to seeing it on Charter. That concludes it. We're going to put music drawing around for enjoy your Saturday.